Last year, for the first time, the Veterans Administration announced it would begin funding its own clinical trials to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and addiction using two psychedelic drugs, psilocybin and MDMA. Even if these trials are successful, it would be years before the VA could prescribe either drug for its patients. Thousands of veterans who are suffering aren't waiting. Desperate for help, they're attending psychedelic retreats in countries where the drugs are legal to use, mostly in indigenous ceremonies. This past March, we were invited to join 9 veterans who traveled to the west coast of Mexico for a psychedelic journey they hoped would finally help ease their pain. They came to Mexico from all over the United States, a group of 9 veterans with invisible wounds that are hard to heal. Their destination, a remote village near Puerto Vallarta, for a week-long psychedelic retreat. It was a voyage into the unknown, but a risk worth taking for T.J. Duff, a former Navy sailor. Are you optimistic?
Being optimistic is hard for me because I've been through a lot of therapy, a lot of different treatments, and not a lot of success.
Duff was 18 when he joined the Navy. Months into his first deployment aboard the USS Cole, he says he narrowly escaped death when 2 suicide bombers attacked the ship in Yemen, killing 17 sailors.
Everyone around me was killed. There's bodies alive and dead being piled up in the midships, and I think that's really where I just started holding everything in.
I don't have it where I'm jumping in ditches when I hear loud noises. My PTSD is kind of a self-destructive form.
Randy Weaver is a police officer in New York. A former staff sergeant in the Army, he was diagnosed with PTSD in 2007 after returning home from tours in Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan.
It's the constant, what if I had done this? What if we did that?
Are those things you want to revisit while you're taking the psilocybin?
Yeah, if I could revisit them and see them maybe from a different perspective, like not where I failed somebody.
Is there a particular incident that you feel you failed somebody?
Yeah, so March 18th, 20 years ago.
In 2004, Weaver's platoon was caught in a firefight in an Afghan village. 2 soldiers were killed, one of them his friend, Staff Sergeant Anthony Lagman. Weaver's worn this bracelet with Lagman's name on it since coming home.
You've been wearing that for 20 years?
Yeah, every day.
Weaver says he's tried nearly every treatment for PTSD the VA offers, including talk therapy, exposure therapy, meditation, and antidepressants.
You get to a point where you're so mentally exhausted and you've created so much destruction that your demons tell yourself that your family would be better off without you. And when those demons tell you those things every day, it's something hard to ignore.
Will this help with that?
I hope so.
The retreat was organized and paid for by the Heroic Hearts Project, a nonprofit that's helped more than 1,000 U.S. veterans with combat-related PTSD access psychedelics.
I came home super angry, super anxious, hypervigilant. That led to a pretty nasty divorce.
Ed Glover was in Afghanistan with the Marines. He's been a firefighter for 22 years.
I feel like 1 or 2 traumatic events you may be able to recover from, but kind of seeing it day in, day out really takes its toll.
As the vets talked, it became clear some of their struggles began long before they joined the military.
My family life was just always this constant conflict.
Navy vet Michael Giardina had an emotionally abusive father who killed himself 16 years ago. His sister died by suicide 5 months before he came here.
My daughter asked my ex-wife if I was going to kill myself, and I'm not. I just want to get better.
To qualify for this retreat, they had to work with their doctors to wean off any antidepressant or anxiety medication they might be taking because of how it could interact with the psychedelics. They also had to have a medical screening and no family history of psychosis or schizophrenia. When we were there, a local doctor was on site, but no mental health professionals.
I appreciate you guys for putting the faith in me, the faith in us coming here.
Jesse Gould, a former Army Ranger, founded the Heroic Hearts Project in 2017 after he tried another psychedelic, ayahuasca, at a retreat in Peru. Gould says psychedelics can help veterans revisit traumatic moments in ways they may be unable to with other therapies.
The value, what we're finding with psychedelics is it's a very individualistic journey. It comes at you, it brings up the emotions, it heightens your senses, and so you're having to face it. And so that's why you see such big revelations, because it's giving you the tools to actually get there.
Do you worry that some who see this as sort of the last hope may end up disappointed?
I worry that we're at the situation where people are having to go to other countries for their last hope. That indicates a major flaw in the system.
The orange one?
Okay.
Heroic Hearts hired traditional healers to conduct 3 psychedelic ceremonies, the first 2 with psilocybin, a psychoactive compound found in some mushrooms. It's been used as medicine by indigenous communities in Mexico and elsewhere for centuries.
You don't need to be strong. All we need for this experience and to receive the healing is humbleness.
The healers stirred ground-up mushrooms into a tea. The vets drank it, put on blindfolds to shut out distractions, and lay down. At first, it seemed like the group might have traveled thousands of miles for a midday nap. But then, about an hour in, we saw Michael Giardina raise his hand for help. His foot soon started to shake, followed by his whole body. By hour 3, it was clear the psilocybin had kicked in. Randy Weaver and TJ Duff barely seemed to move, while firefighter Ed Glover appeared caught between rapture and deep sorrow.
When you let go of it, the truth will appear, so simple and clear.
5 hours later, when the psilocybin began to wear off, the vets removed their eye masks and found the heat of the afternoon sun. The next day, the group gathered to discuss what they'd gone through.
It literally felt like an exorcism. My foot was going crazy. I could kind of feel like my body was convulsing.
I felt like I was taking every last breath of any victim, patient, or friend that I had lost. So I really struggled to breathe yesterday.
I've never done anything like that before.
Randy Weaver appeared to find some of what he traveled all this way for.
One thing that I remember very vividly was flying back with the guys that we lost. Like being on that medevac, even though I wasn't there in the real world, I was there spiritually with them.
TJ Duff, however, found it unsettling and at times scary.
I've heard a lot of your guys' stories, and I did not get as immersive as you guys did. I'm kind of glad I didn't, honestly, because I was kind of afraid of that. But
That night, Duff took part in another psilocybin ceremony, but the next day he left. He later told us the whole experience caused a dangerous decline in his mental health. He's now back on antidepressant medication. The last ceremony of the retreat was with 5-MeO-DMT, a powerful and fast-acting psychedelic secreted from a toad. After returning home, the vets had several virtual meetings with a Heroic Hearts Project counselor.
I think my biggest takeaway was making sure I make the time to take care of myself.
The Veterans Administration warns against self-medicating with psychedelics or using them as part of a self-treatment program. But in December, when we spoke to its top doctor, Sharif El-Nahal, he was enthusiastic about their potential.
Do these retreats concern you?
They can concern me because there's no way to monitor, certify, make sure that they're actually safe environments. They're seeking these therapies because they do not see our current options for them to be effective enough, and they're in a state of desperation. And that in and of itself, them seeking this type of unauthorized therapy is just another indication on why we need to study this further and get it to a safe and effective medical environment.
In August, the FDA rejected a pharmaceutical company's application to use the psychedelic MDMA in combination with therapy as a treatment for PTSD, after an FDA advisory panel said there wasn't enough evidence it was safe or effective. The VA is now conducting 9 clinical trials using MDMA and psilocybin to treat PTSD, depression, and addiction. Dr. Elnahal told us a small Phase 2 trial by the VA using MDMA and therapy to treat PTSD, completed last year, showed real promise.
45% have gone into complete remission, which is essentially a normal emotional state. That is unheard of with prolonged exposure, cognitive processing, and certainly SSRIs. The current standard of care options.
Almost half of the people who came in with PTSD and did MDMA therapy at the VA were cured?
Yes.
So you have no doubt that this works?
We need to do larger Phase 3 clinical trials. That's the best way scientifically to understand what the true adverse events are and whether we can reproduce these results in larger populations of veterans. I'm very optimistic we will be able to demonstrate that.
How long do you think it will be before veterans can go to the VA and get this therapy?
It could be another couple of years. The incoming administration is going to take, a pretty bold stance on this.
What makes you optimistic that the new administration is going to be a believer in this?
We've heard the nominee for HHS, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., talk about what he thinks the potential breakthrough therapy is. We'll see what the stance is of other health officials. But that's really promising.
Nearly a year after that retreat in Mexico, we checked in with the 9 veterans who attended. 8 of them told us their symptoms have improved and called their experience with psychedelics life-changing. Ed Glover says he still feels like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders.
How are you doing?
Very well.
Shortly after coming home from the retreat, he decided to retire as a firefighter.
Prior to the retreat, I thought about taking my life just about every day. I had a very close call. The note, the gun, that is no longer the case.
You haven't had thoughts of killing yourself since then?
Not one.
And Randy Weaver says his suicidal ideations have stopped as well.
I don't have any of those thoughts since going through this journey.
That's remarkable.
I would say, yeah.
You had told the group afterward that you had visualized people on a medevac helicopter that you had served with.
Yeah.
What was the impact of that?
In combat, things happen quickly. 1 minute you're talking to your friend, and the next minute, you're putting him in a body bag. That causes a gap in your psyche. So to be able to revisit those incidences, seeing those helicopters come back with friends, it brings a little peace to you. Yeah.
Could a simple shot in the neck be a breakthrough for the debilitating symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? The toll from PTSD is growing. About 20 veterans a day commit suicide in what the VA is now calling an epidemic. Only 40% find relief from PTSD with current treatments. The new procedure, called stellate ganglion block, or SGB, is so fast-acting that many believe it could be a game changer. Used for decades to treat chronic pain, it's only recently been tried for PTSD. Now, the U.S. Army is spending $2 million to find out more. Nobody is calling it a cure, but the promise of a new therapy can't come soon enough for many veterans we spoke with, frustrated and despairing that nothing they have tried has worked.
My PTSD was like a monster on your back that controls your entire life.
This is what Sergeant First Class Jonathan Zering faced during his 455 days as part of the American offensive in Kunar province in eastern Afghanistan. The densely forested mountains provided cover for the Taliban fighters who launched almost daily attacks. After 15 months, Zering couldn't shake the feeling he was going to be ambushed at any moment.
So your instincts served you well in Afghanistan. But what about when you came home?
When I came home, it did not serve me very well because my brain was still in war. But I was living, trying to be a father and a husband and trying to be a circle in a whole room of squares. I did not feel like the same person anymore.
He suffered for 12 years. His marriage fell apart.
And I went through this period of time where I was like, man, I wish I would have just died in Afghanistan. I could have been remembered as a hero and a shining beacon of what soldiers are supposed to be.
Finally, he reached out to Walter Reed Medical Center.
Were you aware that you were suffering from PTSD?
I thought it was a joke.
You thought PTSD was a joke?
At first. Everyone knows it's hard being in combat, but like that's our job. So being around only military veterans that are all combat guys, it was difficult to ever raise your hand and ask for help.
After 18 years of continuous war, the numbers of soldiers and veterans suffering from PTSD has reached an all-time high. First-line treatments at the VA are antidepressants and talk therapy. Zering told us he was asked to write down his worst combat memories.
They wanted me to read it 20 times before I went to bed. And I did it 1 or 2 days. And I crinkled the piece of paper and threw it away. I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm like, I watched people I know die. Like, that's always gonna bother me.
Did you see any improvement?
0.
Marine Sergeant Henry Cotto also was at the breaking point.
I thought if I keep going the same way I was going, there was only 2 ways I was gonna end. Dead or in jail.
He spent months patrolling Iraqi towns like this one, the war on every corner. After 4 deployments, Cotto told us he was plagued by nightmares. He self-medicated with alcohol and marijuana.
Even though I tried to tell myself, hey, I can calm down, I'm no longer over there, it was really hard for me to shut it off.
What did you think of that at the time?
It got to the point that I thought nothing's gonna help. I'm gonna lose my relationship with my kids. I already lost my relationship with my ex-wife. I lost a lot of friends, especially because, they just didn't want to deal with me anymore.
Let's go in.
He told us he had tried 12 medications, all the VA had to offer, but nothing worked.
All right, Henry, your eyeglasses needs to come up.
When his doctor suggested an experimental treatment called stellate ganglion block, or SGB, he had nothing to lose.
Lay down, please.
We went along to watch Henry Cotto's second treatment at the Long Beach VA. The injection took less than 5 minutes. Within 2 minutes, Cotto told us he felt a huge difference.
Like I can't control my smile right now.
Now, is it like a sense of euphoria?
It's like a big weight has been lifted off my shoulders and my chest, and I can actually relax.
He came back for a second SGB to bolster the effects of the first, 2 months earlier.
It immediately changed your mood, your behavior.
Immediately, my brother took me home. He saw that I was constantly smiling, and he's like, dude, I don't know what they did, but it's amazing.
Clean your neck.
This is how the procedure works. A local anesthetic is injected deep into the neck to bathe a cluster of nerves called the stellate ganglion.
Here I'm going to inject the actual medication, all right?
These nerves help control the brain's fight or flight reactions, signals that go haywire with PTSD.
And please go oblique towards you.
Doctors use a fluoroscope and contrasting dye, you can see it spread out next to the spine, to guide the needle to the stellate ganglion. When the anesthetic is injected, it seems to numb or turn off the PTSD symptoms. It clears the body in a day, but the effects last up to 6 months, for some even longer, and there are no known side effects.
Were you surprised at the outcome?
Extremely, yeah.
Extremely surprised?
Oh, yeah, because there's very few things in medicine that work that quickly.
Dr. Michael Alkire is trying to pinpoint changes in the parts of the brain associated with PTSD. Doctors don't fully understand how SGB works, but the newest theory is based on research that shows PTSD is not just psychological. Exposure to bomb blasts and the prolonged stress of dangerous redeployments can cause physical changes to the brain, making it hyperactive. Dr. Alkire told us 80% of their SGB patients had relief from depression and suicidal thoughts.
It almost sounds like you're rebooting these vets' brains.
That is exactly a very good way to think of it, yeah.
In the waiting room, Henry Cotto's mother is overwhelmed. After watching her son self-destruct, she told us SGB gave her son back. It's not a standalone cure, but Cotto told us his regular therapy now is starting to work.
In the first couple of weeks, I didn't believe it. People would be like, hey, your personality really changed and stuff like that. You know, I think we're going on 2 months. It feels like I got a second chance at life.
Despite its promise, SGB is available at only 12 of the 172 VA hospitals. It's still considered experimental. The Army study is the first clinical trial for SGB with a placebo. Over 100 active duty soldiers with PTSD participated, and it's now under peer review. If the anecdotal success of SGB is duplicated, it could revolutionize the way PTSD is treated.
How have things been going? Anxiety's been pretty high.
For now, most veterans rely on word of mouth to find private clinics like this one, run by Dr. Sean Mulvaney, a former Navy SEAL.
Like, the night stuff's getting, like, a lot worse.
Among military doctors, he was the first to see SGB's potential, especially after his years as a combat medic for special operations soldiers.
We asked them to go do a dirty job. We didn't tell them what was going to happen to them. We didn't tell them we were going to break them.
Dakota Meyer, a former Marine corporal, sought Dr. Mulvaney's help. In 2011, he was the first living Marine to be awarded the Medal of Honor since the Vietnam War.
1, 2, 3, stick.
Dr. Mulvaney stumbled onto SGB 10 years ago.
And slowly starting to inject.
He had read a newspaper article about a treatment for, of all things, hot flashes that targeted the same nerve signals that PTSD disrupts. So he tried it. Since then, he's done about 1,000 injections. He found 70% of the soldiers he treated had reduced anxiety and paranoia.
It's like I can breathe, like I can actually breathe. It's crazy.
Dr. Mulvaney is hoping the results of the Army's clinical trial will make SGB more widely available.
These people, they wrote a blank check to their nation that included their life. And as citizens, we need to help them when they come home, when they're broken.
Jonathan Zering also found his way to Dr. Mulvaney for an SGB.
I felt like a brand new man. And when I say a brand new man, what I mean was I had control of my feelings. It was like I was my own self, my old self. I was John Zering, pre-combat again.
After the shot, Zering found something else had changed too. He had a different attitude toward therapy.
It does not eliminate you having PTSD. It does not make it so you no longer went through those traumatic experiences. But what it does is it makes it so you're not drowning. It gives you a little bit of room. It gives you room to go to get therapy. It gives you room to get help.
I think there's enough evidence out there that this is a valid therapy, and it's something that works.
Former Brigadier General Donald Bolduc had an SGB injection when he was commander of special operations in Africa. It made such a difference that in 2016 he became the first and so far the only active duty senior officer to admit that he too suffered from PTSD. It took him 8 years to overcome the stigma.
Do you remember this soldier?
I certainly do. Marine Special Operations.
A former Green Beret, Bolduc showed us a memorial in his office to the 72 soldiers he lost over 10 deployments. He cheated death himself numerous times, surviving firefights, a 2,000-pound bomb, and this helicopter crash which knocked him unconscious.
What was it like to be around him during that time?
You just don't know what's coming. You don't know what's gonna set him off.
It was his wife, Sharon, who finally made Bolduc confront his PTSD. Get help, she said, or she and the children would leave him.
I'm done. I can't do this by myself anymore. I didn't marry you to be a single parent.
Bolduc had tried traditional therapy with little relief. It was the SGB, he told us, that finally lifted the fog.
Oh, it's magnificent. everything was crisper and clearer, and
he was so much more relaxed.
I was backed off and relaxed.
Instantly. And I think I even said, why didn't we do this years ago? But I don't think we knew about it.
No.
Now retired, Baldock told us he was bypassed for a promotion. Part of the reason, he believes, is his outspokenness about PTSD among active duty soldiers.
Not one of my superiors reached out to me. One told me that it's not going to bode well for me and recommended that I stop talking about it because the more I talk about it, the more problems they have.
It's so widespread in the military today, but yet there's this stigma.
Terrible stigma, lack of understanding, not understanding the science behind it, not understanding what's happening.
So how important is stellate ganglion block in fighting post-traumatic stress?
I think it's hugely important. And I think that it needs to be an intervention that's part of every post-traumatic stress therapy.
This is Victor. Part of Baldock's therapy is Victor, his service dog, who helps him stay calm.
I'm a leader.
Baldock continues to speak out and tells audiences all over the country that treatment for PTSD should carry no more stigma than a broken ankle.
You are strong when you ask for help, not weak. You are strong. So don't be afraid to ask for help no matter what it is.
Jonathan Zering told us SGB was a game changer. Henry Cotto said he wished other veterans could find the relief he did.
I've lost a couple friends to suicide. Just thinking that, this treatment, if it was widely available, those guys could have been around.
I've never had this relief before. It wasn't a pill, it wasn't a bottle of alcohol, it was a shot in my neck that I've never even heard of that lasted maybe a 15-minute procedure, and it helped me.
You've probably heard the term shock treatment used to describe electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. Psychiatrists don't like the term because of the stigma surrounding it, which they say prevents the vast majority of severely depressed patients from ever trying it. What might surprise you to learn is that despite its misuse in the past, ECT is now considered one of the most effective treatments for people who haven't been helped by antidepressant medication. In the U.S. alone, that's more than 5 million Americans suffering from depression so crippling it leads many people to take their own lives.
One of my patients explained it to me, saying that it's not that I want to die, it's that living is too painful.
Dr. Sarah Lisenby works at the National Institute of Mental Health in Maryland, developing new ways to help the more than 35% of depressed patients who don't get better with medication.
Imagine feeling severely depressed, and then you try medication after medication, and those treatments, even though you're doing everything the doctor told you, the treatments are failing you.
How long had they been trying to get some sort of medication that works?
It's not uncommon for someone to have tried 20 or 30 different medications by the time that they come to see me.
So if you're trying 30 medications, that's taking years of your life.
Exactly, and imagine how that would magnify your hopelessness.
We first met Dr. Lisenby in 2001. When Bob Simon watched her and her team administer electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, long considered a treatment of last resort. ECT works by inducing a 1-minute seizure, which the patient doesn't feel because he's been given muscle relaxants and general anesthesia.
Yeah, he's seizing.
Why is the seizure aspect of it so important? Because of all the words, seizure would be the word I would try to avoid the most.
So when the brain is seizing during a seizure, it releases all of the neurotransmitters, the brain chemicals that are the messengers in the brain. And it releases them very rapidly and massively in a higher level than medications do.
The treatment may work wonders, but only a tiny fraction, about 1% of the people who might benefit from it end up trying it.
It's still frightening for people.
It's not something that you have to be afraid of. And so many of my patients, after they've had ECT, say to me, why did I wait so long to do this? Or why did my doctor wait so long to refer me for this?
That was the reaction of former First Lady of Massachusetts, Kitty Dukakis. She's now 81 and has become one of the most famous and outspoken advocates for ECT. She first had the treatment almost 20 years ago.
The next president, Michael Dukakis.
Shortly after her husband, Governor Michael Dukakis, ran unsuccessfully for president in 1988, Kitty Dukakis' struggles with alcohol spiraled out of control.
Dukakis said his wife voluntarily entered the Edge Hill Newport treatment facility in Rhode Island last night.
She's going to be a good patient. She understands herself. I'm married to a very courageous person.
She was treated for alcoholism, but her drinking masked an underlying chronic depression.
I didn't see any way out of this problem that I had.
And had you tried all different kinds of medication?
Every kind you can think of, yes. And none of them worked. None of them were successful.
How long was it that you were trying different medications before ECT?
17 years.
Yeah, it was a long, long time.
One would think that somehow, sometime earlier than 17 years, somebody would have said, hey, go see Dr. Welch.
Dr. Charlie Welch administers ECT here at McLean Psychiatric Hospital outside Boston. He was the person Kitty Dukakis came to see about getting it. What did you say to her when she first came?
I said, I'm glad you've decided to do this. I think we can get you feeling better fairly quickly.
Her doctor previously had told her, who was treating her, told her, don't go for ECT.
Correct.
Back then, ECT was among the most vilified treatments in psychiatry because of the way it used to be administered, portrayed disturbingly in the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Here we go.
Clearly, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest gave ECT a bad name because that's not how it actually is done.
It was done that way in the past.
In the past it was, but it's much more refined.
No anesthesia, too much electricity.
Right.
So
Now,
what's different about it now?
What's different, first of all, is that it's done under general anesthesia with a muscle relaxant. So when the treatment is done, the patient is sound asleep and completely relaxed.
If you're having it done, you don't even know it's happening.
That's correct. For the patient, the experience is like taking a 5-minute nap.
The seizure seems to restore the brain's proper circuitry. In Kitty Dukakis' case, the results were immediate.
I just was like a new person.
It was our anniversary, remember?
Yeah, right.
It was your anniversary?
Yeah.
Do you remember the day? Remember what happened? I picked you up at the hospital. Then what happened?
We got in the car, and Michael started driving, and I said, I think I want to go out for dinner for our anniversary.
You said, let's go out for dinner.
Let's go out, okay.
If somebody hadn't suggested ECT to you, what do you think would have happened to you?
I can't imagine. I mean, I think it would have gotten worse and worse and worse.
I don't think Kitty would be here today.
For most depressed patients, ECT involves about 8 to 12 treatments over several weeks. In the past 20 years, Kitty Dukakis has undergone ECT more than 100 times. If ECT works so well for Kitty Dukakis, why does she need to have repeated treatments?
The nature of depression is that it is usually a relapsing illness.
That's common.
That is very common.
Last spring, Dukakis decided to stop getting ECT. When we first met with her in July, she hadn't had her regular treatments for months. Her depression had returned, and she had difficulty answering our questions. Every doctor I've talked to credits you and your willingness to talk openly about this.
You can explain this better than I can. I'm having trouble speaking right now.
Can you tell us your full name and date of birth, please, Kitty?
Excuse me?
Could you just tell us your full name and date of birth, please?
Catherine Kitty Dukakis.
Realizing she needed help, she resumed getting ECT and allowed us to film it. The whole visit lasted about an hour. Dukakis was sedated and electricity was administered to her brain for a few seconds. The seizure lasted about a minute. The only sign of it was some slight trembling in her feet. When we met her again 2 months later, we could see the difference. The last time we saw you, you weren't feeling well. How are you feeling now?
I'm fine. I feel very well, and I've been having treatment again.
You're okay with the treatment we filmed being broadcast?
Yeah, I am. I'm convinced that if I can be that public, that it will help others, and I think we both feel that way.
Is this something you see doing for the rest of your life?
I probably will have to do this for the rest of my life, and that's okay.
It's just a routine.
That's the way it goes.
But as Kitty Dukakis has experienced to a small degree, ECT carries a disturbing side effect: memory loss.
ECT can cause memory loss. It's been modernized to reduce the amount of memory loss, but it's not zero.
What sort of memory loss do people have? I mean, and is it permanent?
Typically, memories close in time to the treatment. Over time, those memories can return, but the problem is they don't always return completely. That's what motivates my research. I feel like people shouldn't have to choose between their memories and their moods.
Dr. Sarah Lisenby has spent decades trying to solve that problem. She's developed an experimental treatment called magnetic seizure therapy, or MST, that uses magnets instead of electricity to induce the seizure. With ECT, the electricity floods the whole brain, including its memory centers. Magnets are gentler and can pass through tissue more easily, so they can target just 4% of the brain, in the prefrontal cortex, one of the main areas affected by depression.
So this is the magnetic coil.
Dr. Lisenby showed us how the magnetic coil can pinpoint a specific area of the brain. So what is on the monitor?
Okay, so on the monitor, we're looking at a brain scan showing us in real time as we move the coil around on your head, it's showing us where on the brain surface we're targeting.
So this allows it to be more precise in terms of where you're stimulating the brain, as opposed to ECT, which would have a larger area of the brain.
That's right. We can focus the magnetic field more precisely than we can with ECT. For example, we can even find just the right spot in your brain to make your thumb twitch, but not the rest of your arm.
Okay.
So shall we try it? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the coil on your head, and you're going to hear a clicking noise and feel a tapping on your head. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and start. And your hand moved. I'm going to move the coil around a little bit. I'm going to go again. See, I've got your index finger there. Go.
It was 18 years ago that Dr. Lisenby first tried the magnetic treatment on a patient in Switzerland.
Do we have a seizure?
Yes, we have.
I mean, it all happens very fast. It's not a lengthy treatment.
Yeah, you can see she's already waking up.
Smiling.
Yeah, she's smiling. I mean, she's not in pain. And she started to feel better almost right away. And the important thing is she did not have serious side effects.
Since then, Lisenby and others have conducted trials that show the magnetic therapy seems to work in treating depression without causing noticeable memory loss. One study in 2015 that compared ECT and the magnetic treatment found that ECT-induced acute memory disruption is absent after MST, Dr. Lisenby's magnetic therapy. Would it replace ECT?
I would view magnetic seizure therapy, if successful, as an additional tool in the toolbox. For some people, ECT may still be needed, but if magnetic seizure therapy could be effective without the memory loss, who wouldn't want to try that first?
Starting this year, here at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto and also in Dallas, Texas, doctors are comparing the two treatments in the first large coordinated trial by the National Institute of Mental Health. It'll span 5 years and involve more than 250 patients.
Good morning.
Sharon Jacob is one of the patients receiving the magnetic treatment.
I had severe psychosis. I wanted to kill myself with a gun.
Did you have a gun in the house?
There was a gun in the house, yes.
And you had cartridges for it?
I had cartridges, yes.
Once a thriving ophthalmologist, Sharon Jacob lost her career after developing chronic depression that didn't respond to medication. It became so severe, she had to suicide-proof her house, getting rid of all sharp objects, including her ice skates. Still, she wouldn't get ECT.
I didn't want to have ECT because of the stigma and because of the risk of memory loss.
So you decided not to do it?
That's right. And then when my psychiatrist said, how would I like to be part of a study for MST, magnetic seizure therapy?
She let us film her procedure. After several treatments, which she augmented with medication, she began to feel better.
After the fourth treatment, and I said, I feel much lighter.
Lighter, that was the...
Lighter was a term, yeah. Yeah.
Your face lights up when you talk about it.
Yes. Yes, I'm very blessed.
Have you had memory loss?
No, I haven't.
So no short-term or long-term memory loss?
None at all.
Do you feel like yourself?
Right now, I feel very, very good. I feel like my old self.
There is a way out of it.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. There is, yes.
And you're proof of that.
I am.
Artificial intelligence has found its way into nearly every part of our lives, forecasting weather, diagnosing diseases, writing term papers. And now, AI is probing that most human of places, our psyches, offering mental health support, just you and a chatbot, available 24/7 on your smartphone. There's a critical shortage of human therapists and a growing number of potential patients. AI-driven chatbots are designed to help fill that gap by giving therapists a new tool. But as you're about to see, like human therapists, not all chatbots are equal. Some can help heal, some can be ineffective or worse. One pioneer in the field who has had notable success joining tech with treatment is Allison Darcy. She believes the future of mental health care may be right in our hands.
We know the majority of people who need care are not getting it. There's never been a greater need, and the tools available have never been as sophisticated as they are now. And it's not about how can we get people in the clinic, it's how can we actually get some of these tools out of the clinic and into the hands of people.
Allison Darcy, a research psychologist and entrepreneur, decided to use her background in coding and therapy to build something she believes can help people in need, a mental health chatbot she named Wobot.
Like Woe Is Me.
Woe is me.
Wobot is an app on your phone, kind of a pocket therapist that uses the text function to help manage problems like depression, anxiety, addiction, and loneliness, and do it on the run.
I think a lot of people out there watching this are going to be thinking, really? Computer? Psychiatry? Come on.
Well, I think it's so interesting that our field hasn't, had a great deal of innovation since the basic architecture was sort of laid down by Freud in the 1890s, right? That's really that sort of idea of like two people in a room. But that's not how we live our lives today. We have to modernize psychotherapy.
Wobot is trained on large amounts of specialized data to help it recognize words, phrases, and emojis associated with dysfunctional thoughts and challenge that thinking, in part mimicking a type of in-person talk therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
It's actually hard to find a CBT practitioner. And also, if you're actually not by the side of your patient when they are struggling to get out of bed in the morning or at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep and they're feeling panicked, then we're actually leaving clinical value on the table.
And even for people who want to go to a therapist, there are barriers, right?
Sadly, the biggest barrier we have is stigma. But there's, insurance, there's cost, there's wait lists. And this problem has only grown significantly since the pandemic, and it doesn't appear to be going away.
Since Wobot went live in 2017, the company reports 1.5 million people have used it, which you can now only do with an employer benefit plan or access from a health professional. At Virtua Health, a nonprofit healthcare company in New Jersey, patients can use it free of charge.
And you'll be able to converse with it just like you would with a human being.
We downloaded Wobot, entered a unique code that can only be provided by the company, then tried it out.
We found that for people to sort of connect with their mood, we offer like those emojis, which allows people to sort of connect in a non-verbal way.
I posed as someone who was depressed. After several prompts, Wobot wanted to dig deeper into why I was sad. So I came up with a scenario that I feared the day my child would leave home.
Imagine what your negative emotions would be saying if they had a voice. Can you do that? Write one of those negative thoughts here. I can't do anything about it now. I guess I'll just jump that bridge when I come to it.
The normal expression is cross that bridge, and the chatbot detected something might be seriously wrong.
But let's see. John, I'm hearing you say I can't do anything about it. I guess I'll just jump that bridge when I come to it. And I think you might need more support than I can offer. A trained listener will be able to help you in ways that I can't. Would you like to take a look at some specialized helplines?
Now, it's not our job to say this, you are in crisis or you're not, because AI can't really do that in this context very well yet. But what it has caught is, there is something concerning about the way that Jon just phrased that.
Saying only jump that bridge and not combining it with I can't do anything about it now did not trigger a suggestion to consider getting further help. Like a human therapist, Wobot is not foolproof and should not be counted on to detect whether someone might be suicidal.
And how would it know that jump that bridge? Where is it getting that knowledge?
Well,
that
it has been trained on a lot of data and a lot of us, humans labeling the phrases and things that we see. And so it's picking up on kind of sentiment.
Computer scientist Lance Elliott, who writes about artificial intelligence and mental health, says AI has the ability to pick up on nuances of conversation.
How does it know how to do that?
The system is able to, in a sense, mathematically and computationally figure out the nature of words and how words associate with each other. So what it does is it draws upon a vast array of data, and then it responds to you based on prompts or in some way that you instruct or ask questions of the system.
To do its job, the system must go somewhere to come up with appropriate responses. Systems using what's called rules-based AI are usually closed, meaning programmed to respond only with information stored in their own databases. Then there's generative AI, in which the system can generate original responses based on information from the internet.
If you look at ChatGPT, that's a type of generative AI. It's very conversational, very fluent, but it also means that it tends to make it open-ended, that it can say things that you might not necessarily want it to say. It's not as predictable, while a rules-based system is very predictable. Wobot is a system based on rules that's been very kind of controlled so that way it doesn't say the wrong things.
Wobot aims to use AI to bond with users and keep them engaged.
Sometimes it can be a little pushy for folks.
That's absolutely bizarre. So we have to dig in there to that.
Its team of staff psychologists, medical doctors, and computer scientists construct and refine a database of research from medical literature, user experience, and other sources.
It'll lead to a better conversation.
Then writers build questions and answers.
The structure, I think, is pretty locked in.
And revise them in weekly remote video sessions.
Actions, thoughts, and they're all interrelated.
Wobot's programmers engineer those conversations into code. Because Wobot is rules-based, it's mostly predictable. But chatbots using generative AI that is scraping the internet are not.
Some people sometimes refer to it as an AI hallucination. AI can, in a sense, make mistakes or make things up or be fictitious.
Sharon Maxwell discovered that last spring after hearing there might be a problem with advice offered by Tessa, a chatbot designed to help prevent eating disorders, which, left untreated, can be fatal. Maxwell, who had been in treatment for an eating disorder of her own and advocates for others, challenged the chatbot.
So I asked it, how do you help folks with eating disorders? And it told me that it could give folks coping skills. Fantastic. It could give folks resources to find professionals in the eating disorder space. Amazing.
But the more she persisted, the more Tessa gave her advice that ran counter to usual guidance for someone with an eating disorder. For example, it suggested, among other things, lowering calorie intake and using tools like a skin-fold caliper to measure body composition.
The general public might look at it and think, that's normal tips, like don't eat as much sugar or eat whole foods, things like that. But to someone with an eating disorder, that's a quick spiral into a lot more disordered behaviors and can be really damaging.
Maxwell reported her experience to the National Eating Disorders Association, which had featured Tessa on its website at the time. Shortly after, it took Tessa down. Ellen Fitzsimmons-Kraft, a psychologist specializing in eating disorders at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, helped lead the team that developed Tessa.
That was never the content that our team wrote or programmed into the bot that we deployed.
So initially, there was no possibility of something unexpected happening.
Correct.
You developed something that was a closed system. You knew exactly, for this question, I'm going to get this answer.
Yep.
The problem began, she told us, after a healthcare technology company she and her team had partnered with, named Cass, took over the programming.
She says Cass explained the harmful messages appeared when people were pushing Tessa's question and answer feature.
What's your understanding of what went wrong?
My understanding of what went wrong is that at some point, and you'd really have to talk to Cass about this, but that there may have been generative AI features that were built into their platform. And so my best estimation is that these features were added into this program as well.
Cass did not respond to multiple requests for comment.
Does your negative experience with Tessa, being used in a way you didn't design, does that sour you towards using AI at all to address mental health issues?
I wouldn't say that it turns me off to the idea completely, because the reality is that 80% of people with these concerns never get access to any kind of help, and technology offers a solution. Not the only solution, but a solution.
Social worker Monica Ostroff, who runs a nonprofit eating disorders organization, was in the early stages of developing her own chatbot when patients told her about problems they had with Tessa. She told us it made her question using AI for mental health care.
I want nothing more than to help solve the problem of access, because people are dying. Like, this isn't just somebody sad for a week. This is people are dying. And at the same time, any chatbot could be in some ways a ticking time bomb, right, for a smaller percentage of people.
Especially for those patients who are really struggling, Ostroff is concerned about losing something fundamental about therapy, being in a room with another person.
The way people heal is in connection, and they talk about this one moment where, when you're, as a human, you've gone through something, and as you're describing that, you're looking at the person sitting across from you, and there's a moment where that person just gets it.
A moment of empathy.
You just get it, like you really understand it. I don't think a computer can do that.
Unlike therapists, who are licensed in the state where they practice, most mental health apps are largely unregulated.
Are there lessons to be learned from what happened?
So many lessons to be learned. Chatbots, especially specialty area chatbots, need to have guardrails. It can't be a chatbot that is based in the internet.
It's tough, right? Because the closed systems are kind of constrained and they may be right most of the time, but they're boring eventually, right? People stop using them.
Yeah, they're predictive, because if you keep typing in the same thing and it keeps giving you the exact same answer with the exact same language, I mean, who wants to do that?
Protecting people from harmful advice while safely harnessing the power of AI is the challenge now facing companies like Wobot Health and its founder, Allison Darcy.
There are going to be missteps if we try and move too quickly. And my big fear is that those missteps ultimately undermine public confidence in the ability of this tech to help at all. But here's the thing, we have an opportunity to develop these technologies more thoughtfully. And so, I hope we take it.